All right, Tony, let's tee up this Maryland game before we move on to Purdue. And the big sore spot would be interior blocking, offensive line. Chip Tranum, 3 yards per carry. It wasn't until maybe the last 2 drives of the game, Mayan Williams started to be a battering ram down the field a few times. But other than that, I thought it was a really good performance. But we'll start with what appears to be the weakness.
Yeah, and that was a popular topic of conversation with Ryan Day on Tuesday. And you think back to the Notre Dame game. I think it starts back there with Travion Henderson having like a 60-yard touchdown run, and the team rushing for whatever they did, 130 yards or whatever, and half of that came on the one carry. And Ryan Day said, the yards all count. People say you take away one run and it all counts. But then when Travion Henderson isn't playing, you literally take away that one run, and you end up with the 60 yards that they ended up with against Maryland. And so if you're not going to get that one big carry that clouds some of the statistics, then things are going to look bad. And they miss him. And, I still don't think Mayan Williams is the Mayan Williams that we've seen from the past. And Chip Trainum is what he is. And the fact that he has overtaken Mayan being what he is interesting to me, but not having Travion Henderson cloud some things, but also it's not like Travion Henderson has been outstanding either. He's averaging 7 yards a carry or so, like 6.8, but it's because of those big runs. He still gets tackled like the other guys do right at the line of scrimmage. And that's because you look at this offensive line and there's very little push, and they can bring in more tight ends into the box. That just brings in more defenders into the box, which creates even less push. So Ryan Day was asked about it, didn't have any really great answers other than, sometimes it's hands, sometimes it's feet, sometimes, it's just not physical enough, although I don't actually think he said that. And the common refrain was everybody can get better. And that's what you say when you don't want to say these guys aren't good enough.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to come out of Ryan Day's mouth. Anything, I think he's taken that there's about 4 versions of physical that he's completely let's not even go there. Kevin, your thoughts about the win over the Terps?
Yeah, and it kind of dovetails into some of the things that Ryan Day talked about during the presser, as well as the play of the offensive line. And obviously, even Joel Klatt was talking about how the offensive line wasn't climbing up into the second level, and your running backs are getting hit at the line of scrimmage a yard back. It's just not necessarily working out. And he was asked about shaking things up maybe on the offensive line. I mean, how are the backups looking? And it's not a case that the backups are pushing, trying to get 20 or 30 snaps a game, which is kind of, again, coach speak for they're not quite there yet. But offensive line certainly is a major concern in terms of the run game. And then when you look at this upcoming Purdue game, one thing that Purdue does well is get after the quarterback. Now, it hasn't necessarily faced many teams that are known for quarterback play or anything like that. I mean, we are talking about a Purdue team that is 1-5 on the year, but Ohio State's offensive line is going to have to perform better, because it is just not getting it done in terms of what it needs to do. And here on Wednesday, we're supposed to be able to talk to assistants more so than players, and the hope will be that maybe we get to talk to Justin Fry again and kind of see what the mindset is there with how the offensive line is playing, because it's here through the first 6 games, with Purdue being the 6th game, maybe you're able to get away with some stuff, but boom, right there at game 7, you're hosting Penn State, a team that certainly has a strong front 7, and I think it's going to get really real in a hurry.
Yeah, a little bit of a disadvantage. I've been in Minneapolis the last 2 days for the Big Ten basketball media days, so I did not attend Coach Day's press conference yesterday, but did follow along on a lot that was discussed, and it sounds like it's a personnel issue, just not executing the blocking schemes and not executing the blocks. I saw the Joel Klatt video as well, and he laid it out there as best as you can that the offensive linemen just aren't getting to the linebackers who are then able to run free and make plays and hit the running backs to the line of scrimmage, and you're just not going to get a lot of yards when they're getting hit in the backfield and they're getting hit right at the line of scrimmage. So I'm not sure what you're going to do 5 games into a season to change that. Kind of, you are what you are at this point. I saw one comment that they were really only out schemed by Maryland one time. So kind of lays it at the feet of the players for not executing what was laid out there. But it's not good enough, very simply. It's not, I mean, that game last week, I got on a downhill roll on our, as you guys know, I want to do on our post-game show. Just so many things were wrong about that game. And what's particularly galling is it came after an open week. And, for 2 weeks, they had everybody, as we feared, telling them you are the greatest thing in the world after beating Notre Dame by basically a technicality. They beat Notre Dame by that much. It isn't like you went out there and you dominated Notre Dame in their stadium. You won the game by 6 inches, So let's don't, crown them. And now Notre Dame, of course, has gone on the road and lost to Louisville, who seems like a good enough team, I suppose. But there were so many things wrong with the game last week that the running game is obviously the number one thing that is just completely out of whack for Ohio State right now. But it's not good enough. If it was a good team, they would have been down 17-0 instead of 10-0, maybe 21-0. And I mean, Maryland turned it over on 4th down in Ohio State territory. I mean, that would have been another something had they converted that. Great play by the defense. The defense is holding them in these games till the offense finally chips away, and they're winning the game on 60 minutes of attrition more than they're beating the opponent. That's kind of what I got watching the game, that Maryland in the 4th quarter realized, well, we got it to the 4th quarter. We're down 3. We achieved our mission. We got it to the 4th quarter. Then they just kind of rolled over and played dead in the 4th quarter. And Ohio State, punched it in a couple times. And I mean, God, he played right into their hands, turning it over on downs at the 30-yard line. And then there was a personal foul and they moved it to the 15-yard line and, scored after that. I mean, the game was over. So we can get into some of it here in this hour, but to me, they were poorly prepared, poorly coached, had no energy, had no drive, and that's what it showed.
Before we move on from the offensive line, the pass protection's, I think, reasonably good, right?
Well, even the Josh Fryer sack, Kyle McCord has an entire pocket to step up into, and he's just hanging back, 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, waiting to get sacked. When there was a definite pocket for him to step into. So I think that's also an issue. If Kyle McCord sees things quicker, sooner, earlier, feels that pressure and just steps up into where, you're allowed to move up in there and step in there and see things. But I don't know if right now he just needs a wider view. And yet when they start moving tempo, he starts doing better. When, it shouldn't taking an entire quarter for this to really get him going, I think is an issue. But I also think that time shrinks down the more he plays, and you won't need an entire quarter to get going. But the sack that Josh Fryer gave up, I can't fault Josh Fryer necessarily for that one, because a quarterback is allowed to step up into the pocket and throw it or take off or whatever. And I'm sure people would have been screaming at CJ Stroud for that one last year.
Yeah, Ohio State very much a slow starting team. I think it's 21 first quarter points. The second quarter, I mean, everybody says it's a bad first half team, but I think the second quarter is somewhere in the high 60s, like 68, I think, and then 41 and 41 in the third and fourth, respectively. But Ohio State has to get out there to a quicker start. I think that Ohio State, it might behoove Ohio State to run a little bit more tempo as soon as it is available. I mean, you can't necessarily do it off of a 1 yard running loss or anything like that. But I think that giving Kyle maybe a little less time to sit there and try and think for the perfect situation every single time and just have him go out there and ball may be the best thing for him at this point. And it certainly seems like that's when he relaxes a little and is freed up somewhat.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I had the same thoughts about Kyle McCord looking good in the second half. And once he gets into the rhythm of the game, and obviously the final drive plus against Notre Dame, but early on, another Joel Klatt analysis. And then once he breaks it down, and you can see not necessarily the 22 film, but you can see behind the quarterback down the field, you see where he checks down. And again, it didn't seem to be an issue later in the game after probably getting a talking to, but the first couple drives where clean pocket, he's standing there, and he's not waiting for linebackers to clear and windows to open, and he's just boom, check down. And but then again, he didn't do that the entire game. Things opened up. Marvin Harrison did his thing, and the passing game got going. But to Steve's point, it could be 17 zip, 21 zip against a good team down the road if they don't figure out how to get things jump started from the get-go.
Well, and I think that's also the frustrating thing, is because you know what he can do. And so when he's not doing it and you're planning on him doing that, that changes how you call plays, what you're calling, the effectiveness, setting up the next play. And yet even when, he completed 2 long passes, one to Marvin Harrison for 58 yards and one to Julian Fleming for like 37 or something like that. And both of those should have been, the Marvin Harrison should have been a 90-yard touchdown. The other should have been a touchdown as well. Like, you're 2 for 2 for 95 yards on those, but you should have been 2 for 2 for 130, 140 yards on those. And, that's something that people remember as well. And that's why people are a little upset with McCord, but he finished like 17 of 22, his last 22 passes for, however, 200 and whatever yards. And so that is all there. And we remember the Notre Dame thing, and you're not just you can't live on that forever. Troy Smith or JT Barrett got to live off of the Penn State comeback win for 1 week before he went to Iowa, and his first pass got picked sixth. So it doesn't last for long, and you've got to stack games on top of games. But I saw the comment in here about he's Craig Krenzel. 2 of 7 is Craig Krenzel. 17 of 22 was never, ever Craig Krenzel. And so he is far beyond Craig Krenzel as a passer. But it's like people think it's Craig Krenzel and it's CJ Stroud. And there's a long, there's a big gap between those two, and a long line of quarterbacks that you could put in there. You don't have to be down here or up there. It's okay to be somewhere in the middle. And that's where Kyle McCord is right now. You're muted, Mark.
I don't even know if it's worth mentioning, but I will anyway, because we're talking about running game struggling. Was that Maryland game, speaking of last year's Maryland game with Dallan Hayden, was that like a mirage or something that never happened? Like, why is he gone? A mystery.
I can jump in. I mean, because the plan is to redshirt him. They don't want to play him more than 4 games. We've seen injuries hit the Ohio State running back room in the past, and if you have those 4 games available in mid to late November and even into the bowl season, you put yourself in a better position. It's not necessarily worth rolling him out there and letting him have 5 carries in a game and get him up to 5 games, and then he loses a year of eligibility. So according to Ryan Day, Dallan Hayden is ready to go. It's not a lack of practice ethic or anything like that that's keeping him off the field. But when you have the 3 backs, the 3 veteran backs, there are a lot of veterans right now that are, holding down positions, and they just don't want to burn younger guys that have a red shirt available to them their year at this point. So, if you get into a point where you need to insert them into a game, you could still run them 30 times in a game. It doesn't matter. I mean, you get 4 games regardless if it's 1 play in the game or 60 plays in a game. So that's kind of where we stand.